Making the Grinch and his ramshackle sleigh was a task I set myself on a cold winter day. I studied the plans, made some important notes, only to discover the Grinch was the goat. His sleigh was not as simple as it would first appear. In some cases it curled forwards, and sometimes the rear. A genius of engineering it seemed that he was, and building his sleigh was difficult because. So first a detailed sketch I did draw, for careful measurements and pieces to saw. Now for a ramshackle sleigh, new wood would not work, it's simply too clean, too perfect a look. As luck would have it, in the rafters of my shop, old lumber there was, and go to waste it would not. Discolored and rough sawn and splintered they were, perfect for ramshackle sleds to be sure. I cleaned up the wood and cut it to size, to make the bed of the sled that the Grinch would soon ride. The bed of the sled was near ready and done, but it wasn't going anywhere without skis for some fun. So with some more rough sawn wood and angles cut to 30, the curly bits I cut and went together in a hurry. Now that the skis were cut, glued, and screwed, a mount they did need to hold them in place, or the Grinch would find himself with snow in his face. So triangle brackets were fashioned with wood, and then screwed to the bed and the skis where they stood. Last but not least, for the sled part of this, was the curl on the front, and this we couldn't miss. The pieces were cut, glued, and screwed for good measure. The whole thing was attached to the front of the sleigh, and with a big Grinchy grin and a pat on the head, the ramshackle sleigh build was done and in bed. But now came the hard part, a piece I had been dreading. Creating the Grinch, oh, that I'd been fretting. So using the art skills I had learned in grade 5, I made a grid to serve as my guide. I transferred the grid to the wood I would use to cut out the Grinch, and Little Max too. Once the grid was done, using squares as my guide, I drew up the Grinch to the appropriate size. Once he and Max were drawn out and planned, I grabbed my jigsaw and began to cut. Oh, the cutting began and seemed to never end, until finally released was my little green friend. But they looked rather dull without colors and faces, so to the paint store it was, I was off to the races. With colors in hand and a glint in my eye, to life I started bringing my flat wooden guys. The colors looked good and I was pleased with what I had done, but something seemed missing. They seemed not quite fun. So in the Seussian way, the black paint I got, and outlined the shapes, and oh my how they popped. With every stroke of the brush, the Grinch did emerge. But how to describe him, I was struggling for words. But my friend Boris Karloff's voice I had heard. He was Grinchy and foul, nauseating and gunk. But the 3 best words to describe him were stink, stank, stunk. With the Grinch all but done and Max ready to show, they were missing one thing, not quite ready to go. To steal all the presents from the Who's down below, the Grinch would need sacks to grab stuff and go. The Who's Christmas pudding and the Who's roast beast would need to be stuffed into sacks at the least. Sacks I didn't have, but burlap I did. So I cut and stapled and sewed sacks together so the Grinch and Max could do their job better. All the parts were now done and ready to go. We just had to assemble and pray for some snow. A few brackets there to attach the Grinch to the sled, and a bracket here so Max wouldn't lose his head. Now the Grinch is set with his ramshackle sleigh to ride in the night and ruin Christmas Day. He will try to stop Christmas from coming, you see, to keep the Who's from singing with hearts full of glee. But fret not, little tots, there's no way he can succeed, because Christmas is more than presents and trees. It comes without ribbons, it comes without tags, it comes without packages, boxes, and bags. Perhaps Christmas doesn't come from a store. Perhaps Christmas means just a little bit more.